Before the highways, before the freedom of the open road, before the sound we all know, that deep, rolling thunder of an engine roaring to life, there was nothing but horses, dust, and silence. This is the story of how two wheels and a single engine changed the world forever. It begins in 1885 in a small garden shed in Cannstatt, near Stuttgart, Germany. Inside, an engineer named Gottlieb Daimler and his brilliant partner, Wilhelm Maybach, were working in secret. They had just built something remarkable, a small, lightweight petrol engine, fast and compact, which they nicknamed the Grandfather Clock. But they had a problem. They needed something to test it on. And here is the strange part. They weren't dreaming of a motorcycle at all. Their real goal was a car. This little machine was only ever meant to be an experiment. So they took their engine and bolted it into a crude frame carved from beechwood. 2 large wheels and 2 tiny outrigger wheels on the sides to stop the whole thing from simply falling over. They called it the Reitwagen, the riding car. And without ever intending to, they had just created the world's first motorcycle. On a cold day in November 1885, Daimler's 17-year-old son, Paul, climbed onto the tall wooden saddle. He fired the engine and rode off through the streets, becoming the very first motorcyclist in all of human history. It was a short ride, only a few kilometers, because there was one small, flaming problem. The engine's ignition tube ran red hot, and it sat directly beneath that wooden seat. Partway through his historic first ride, the saddle caught fire. The world's very first biker was riding a machine that was, quite literally, burning underneath him. The Reitwagen had no suspension at all. It shook so violently that it earned a nickname, the Bone Shaker. One writer called it an instrument of torture. It was slower than a bicycle, brutally uncomfortable, and within a single year, Daimler abandoned it completely and went back to building his 4-wheeled car. But it didn't matter. The seed had been planted. Now, was the Reitwagen truly the first? That question still starts arguments to this day. Because decades earlier, back in the 1860s, inventors like Sylvester Roper in America and the Michaud-Perrault team in France had already strapped steam engines onto bicycles. They hissed, they smoked, and they rolled, years before Daimler was even finished. But steam was a dead end. As one historian put it, history follows the things that succeed, not the things that fail. And it was Daimler's gasoline engine, not steam, that would go on to power almost every car, boat, and aircraft the world would ever build. But a single experiment is not an industry. That came 9 years later, in 1894, in the city of Munich. 2 brothers, Heinrich and Wilhelm Hildebrand, joined forces with an inventor named Alois Wolfmüller. Together, they built the very first motorcycle ever mass-produced and sold to the public. And it was their machine that finally gave this new invention its name. In German, Motorrad. In English, the motorcycle. Around 2,000 were built, but the company burned bright and fast, and by 1897, it was already gone. And then, the idea crossed the ocean. In America, everything was about to change. In 1901, a company called Indian built its very first motorcycle, and before the First World War, they would become the best-selling motorcycles on the entire planet. Then, in 1903, inside a tiny wooden shed in Milwaukee, a young man named William Harley joined forces with the Davidson brothers. They called their little company Harley-Davidson. A legend was born, one that still thunders down the highways of the world today. And soon, the motorcycle became so much more than a machine. In 2 world wars, brave dispatch riders carried vital messages across the battlefield, weaving through fire and mud to keep entire armies connected. And in peacetime, it became something else entirely. A symbol of freedom, of rebellion, of the open road, the wind, and the endless horizon. So the next time you find a rusted old machine, forgotten in some dusty barn, remember what you are really looking at. Not scrap, not junk, but a direct descendant of that crude, shaking, fire-prone little wooden contraption from 1885. Every motorcycle ever built carries that entire history inside it. And with the right pair of hands, that history can roar back to life. One more time.